Greetings! In today's video, I am making a moth. The most relevant design element to plot out is definitely the wings shape and the pattern that's on them. So that's the first thing I start drawing. The fascinating aspect to remember is that the patterns on butterfly and moth wings has evolved to imitate the appearance of larger animals' eyes, as to ward off or at least confuse any predators attacking from behind. Alongside the size of the wings, I choose the size of the body, the length of the legs, and the placement of the head. When making insects, it's always good to keep in mind that they are divided into three sections: head, thorax, and abdomen. Any legs and wings are connected to the thorax, so don't go adding limbs to its butt like I did. This issue will be fixed later in the video. The pattern I settled on for the wings is a relatively simple one, as I plan on soldering it together and I want it to remain clear and understandable throughout. A very intricate design would become visually cluttered, and I prefer the simplicity of a strong shape to overcrowded detail. I begin, very briefly, shaping one wing, and then pivot to making the legs. Much like my crab's legs, I cut out many separate segments and twist them together to make a sturdy structure. An improvement from the crustacean is, because I don't plan on this build sitting on the ground, I can taper the legs off properly rather than having to worry about damaging surfaces. All of this twisting work I would usually do with the assistance of a bench vise. However, I do not have one of those at the moment, so my pliers and shaky hands will have to suffice. I go back to the wings and essentially decide to make all four outlines out of one continuous length of wire. That will make it easier to connect to the body later on, although it does slightly complicate getting each one in the correct shape and orientation, as shifting one wing's proportions around changes the shape of the others because I'm pulling on same length of one wire. Here, I inspect my work. Moving on, I begin crafting the pattern on the wings. I intend to have a circle approximately in the middle of each one. I therefore have to devise some way to fit it in the void that is each wing. That's where a number of weird wavy patterns come in to assist. Each one of the wave's peaks is meant to connect to the circle in the center, and each valley will connect to the edge of the wing, creating a sort of web to hold all the elements in place. The super tedious, relentlessly repetitive process now becomes: attach the wavy things to the circles, then attach the whole to each wing, and solder everything in place so it doesn't move. While making the first wing, I was convinced this wasn't going to be that bad, but I was wrong. By the time I'd completed the last wing, I wanted to go to bed and sleep forever. The reason this segment was so difficult was because I was working with a number of free-floating pieces and attaching them together with tiny segments of the thinnest wire I have. This wasn't something I could just turn my brain off and do. In addition to that, soldering so many separate segments meant a lot of waiting for the material to get hot in between small bursts of progress. Undoubtedly though, the result is completely worth it. The next day, I get to work shaping the leg segments and connecting them in sets of 3. I can say with relative confidence that I have learned some good lessons from the noodle soup that was the bottom of my crab. Planning out how the legs were going to link together and what space they would fill, rather than just hooking them up one at a time, gave very good results, and although not perfect, the underside of my moth is quite neat and tidy. At this point, I'm wondering also if the legs are too long or too short. However, I resolve to leave that problem for future me to solve. Presently, the moth has all of its limbs attached to it. It's missing a body, a head, and 2 antennae. Therefore, it's time to solve that. A spiral of wire begins to take the shape of a head and starts to get chunkier to transition into the thorax. It curls around the legs repeatedly to gain stable purchase and coils behind them into the shape that will become the abdomen. It's a slightly uncomfortable process with the wings and legs in the way, but it would be a lot worse if I had to do it the other way around. Making the wings was difficult enough without the insect body in the way. Capping off the abdomen is simple enough, but I realized that it's behaving a lot like a spring, which makes its shape too long and its coils not compact enough. My solution to that is to run a small wire down the center of the abdomen and hook it to the end, so that it adds some tension and keeps the springiness under control. With that sorted, it's time to take care of the very fluffy antennae. For this, I decide to imitate a fine-toothed comb, a thicker section at the top with many small protrusions dropping downwards from it. I therefore fix my 2 main supports, trim them each to size, and begin adding the many tiny teeth to each one. Because each little piece is exactly the same, and being in such large numbers, any imperfection gets swallowed up by the volume, this is a process you can very much turn your brain off while doing. Besides, just like the wings, this might take forever, but the result is absolutely worth the effort. Then, it's time to solder everything together. With everything secured, I give the floof on the antennae a good trimming to the correct size, which is a process that turned out to be a bit more difficult than anticipated, since the density of the floof is high and it gets in the way of my pliers all the time. Nonetheless, finally, with the moth complete, it's time to put it on a stand. I was initially pondering if I should perch it on a branch or stand it on the ground or some other sort of combination. However, in the end, I settled on having it suspended mid-flight, as that would give me the best chance to display the wings open in their full breadth. In conclusion, I am happy with this build. I can see the improvement from the octopus to this. I'm picking up the lessons that each field is teaching me, and I can feel a lot of the rust shaking off me. The wings are a solid blend of a design that is beautiful while keeping in mind the limitations that would allow me to build them. The antennae could be trimmed a little better and could probably use some organizing, but the effect I was going for is there. The body segments are well proportioned, and aside from the wings creating a little bit of a backpack, all the features are integrated homogeneously. The legs are well tapered, and attaching them wasn't a mess either. So there you go. That has been me making a moth. I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the future.